Hey everyone, welcome to our divisional round predictions for the 2023-24 NFL season. We just got through the first round, the wild card games for the playoffs. Now we're looking at the divisional rounds. We're down to 8 final teams in the NFL playoffs. There was a lot of upsets this past weekend, but what we're going to be looking at today is our predictions video. So who we think is going to win, lose, and what we predict the final scores will be for each of these 4 games. So hit that like button and subscribe, and let's get things started. So we have 2 games on Saturday, 2 games on Sunday this weekend. There's no Monday night games, no Thursday night games. Kicking things off Saturday, January 20th, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. on ESPN. We have the 10-7 Texans versus the 13-4 Baltimore Ravens. This is the AFC divisional round here. The Baltimore Ravens will be at home because they are the #1 seed. And the Ravens are coming in here. They are 9.5-point favorites here, so a pretty big spread. Obviously, props to the Texans. They are coming off of a win this past weekend, and they won pretty big versus the Cleveland Browns. They had a really good showing. Obviously, they have a really good offensive roster. They have C.J. Stroud. They have Singletary at running back. They have Collins at wide receiver. But obviously, the Baltimore Ravens are the #1 seed for a reason. They have a top 5 offense. They have a top 5 defense. They are led by Lamar Jackson. They've been lighting things up on both sides of the ball. And some of the biggest news, Mark Andrews will also be playing this game. He has been a full participant in the practices this week. That's a big upgrade for them because obviously this team has been rolling without him, but Lamar Jackson has been carrying the offense. He is the leading passer and the leading rusher. Now they have Mark Andrews. He's going to take a lot of pressure off of Lamar Jackson because he's a go-to weapon on 3rd and long situations. Looking at the team stats here, you have the Texans coming in. They average 22.2 points per game. Baltimore averages 28.4 points per game. Like we said, the Ravens have a top 5 offense. Looking at the defense, Houston comes in. They average 20.8 points per game. Baltimore averages 16.5 points per game. So Baltimore also has a top 5 defense. One of the best rounded rosters. Do not overlook Houston, though. This is a very big spread game, but they're just coming off of a massive beatdown of the Cleveland Browns. The Browns having one of the best defenses in the country, and they lit them up. What Houston will try to do is they will try to shut down the passing game for the Ravens, force Lamar Jackson to beat them on 3rd and longs, and having to run the ball. So they're going to try to put a lot of pressure on Lamar Jackson, but obviously that's easier said than done. Baltimore can beat you multiple ways. They can beat you on defense, special teams, running the ball, and passing the ball, and they now have Mark Andrews back. So that makes them even deadlier than they have been the whole season. But they did rest their starting lineup the last weekend of the season, and obviously they had a bye week last weekend. So they haven't played football now in going on 2 to 3 weeks. So it is very possible that Baltimore can be rusty. So they could have a slow start, but then also they could come out and they could score right off the bat. But this is 2 really good offenses. Both teams have deadly weapons. I have Baltimore, though, getting the win. I have them winning 28-20, not covering the spread, but still getting the win and moving on to the next round. The next game that we're going to be looking at 8:15 on Fox, you have the 9-8 Green Bay Packers versus the 12-5 San Francisco 49ers. This game is in California. This is the NFC divisional round, and San Francisco comes in here as 9-point favorites. So both of these first 2 games, there's pretty big favorites here. There was a lot of upsets this past weekend. Obviously, the Packers beat the Cowboys, kicked them out of the playoffs. They scored a lot of points on a top 5 defense. They did give up some yards, but a lot of those yards were in garbage time. Obviously, Packers having a really strong season under Jordan Love. They had a really bad first half, but they were one of the better second half teams of the whole season. They lit things up. Jordan Love really took a lot of steps forward. He was running it. He was throwing it. He had 4,200 passing yards, 32 touchdowns, and 11 picks. And like I was saying, he can also scramble the ball. And their defense, even though they did get lit up the second half this past weekend, that was garbage points. The defense looked a lot better second half of the season, particularly the rush defense, and their D-line was playing a lot better. But when you look at the 49ers, on paper, they probably have the best, the top roster in all of the NFL, top to bottom on both sides of the ball. They have one of the most talented offensive teams. So they have Brock Purdy, they have Christian McCaffrey, they have Ayuk, they have Kittle, They have Debo. They have lots of weapons. This team can beat you passing, running. They play good special teams. And they also, just like the Ravens, have a top 5 defense and they have a top 5 offense. So they're one of the most routed teams. And then you have the Packers, who are kind of the upstart team that came out of nowhere second half. But don't overlook them, because they obviously just curb stomped the Cowboys this past weekend. Looking at the total team stats here, you have the Packers coming in. They average 22.5 points per game. San Francisco averages 28.9 points per game. That's a top 5 offense. On defense, Green Bay does have a top 10 defense. They give up 20.6 points per game, but the 49ers have a top 5 defense. They give up 17.5 points per game. So obviously, the 49ers are massive favorites here. But just like the Ravens, they did rest a lot of their starters the last weekend of the regular season, and obviously they also, being the number 1 seed, had a bye week this past weekend. So they could be rusty. With Brock Purdy had a really good season so far this year, but Green Bay is going to stack that line. They have a good rush defense, so they're going to try to force Brock Purdy into throwing situations. He's been pretty good this year, hasn't made a lot of mistakes, but with him, whenever he's been bad, he's been really bad. There's absolutely zero middle ground. Either he has 3 passing touchdowns or he has 3 picks. There's no middle ground. Usually he's been really good, but if you catch him on a bad weekend, he's just god-awful, throws a lot of picks. So Green Bay is hoping that they can shut down McCaffrey, force Brock Purdy to have to throw the ball 45, 50 times per game and try to pick him off, try to keep this game close, and try to beat them running the ball, keep the ball out of the offensive hands of the 49ers. But I just think the 49ers are too good. This is their chance. This is their season. This is one of the best teams that they have fielded. They did add Chase Young at the halfway point. If they were ever to compete for the Super Bowl, the time is right now, because a lot of these guys are going to be getting paid. So you won't be able to keep this team together forever. I have the 49ers here getting the win, 34-20, and I have them covering that spread and moving on to the next round of the playoffs as well. We're now moving on to our Sunday slate games. So Sunday, January 21st at 3 p.m. on NBC, we have the 9-8 Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the 12-5 Detroit Lions. This is the NFC Divisional playoff round. This is going to be in Detroit, and the Lions are coming in here as 6.5-point favorites here. The Bucs are coming off of a beatdown of the Philadelphia Eagles. That was not surprising to me, because I did pick the Eagles to lose this past weekend. There was just too many things stacked up. They were one of the worst teams for the last 2 months of the season. Started out really well, and then everything completely fell apart. They had a lot of injuries, and they were playing really sloppy football on both sides of the ball. Tampa Bay kind of came out of nowhere. Props to them. Props to the coach. Props to the teams. Props to Baker Mayfield. So Baker's had a really bad run since his rookie season. I'm really happy for the guy. Finally had a good year. Baker's always one of those guys. There's good Baker, bad Baker. There's nothing in the middle. He's been good Baker the whole season and played really well this past weekend. I'm really happy for them. No one thought that they would make it to this point of the playoffs. No one had them making the playoffs this year. They were only supposed to win 5 or 6 games, but they beat the odds. They made it through. Lions picked up right where they were last year, had a really strong end of the season. Last season started this year really hot, and then the halfway point, they kind of fell off the rails. Started having a lot of turnovers. Defense started playing really lousy, but they got things back on track the last 3 to 4 weeks. Looked really good this past weekend in the playoffs. Tampa Bay, obviously, they have a really good defense. They have a really good D-line. They get a lot of pressure on the opposing quarterback. So they're going to be looking to disrupt Goff, force him, hit him, sack him, often sack him a lot. With the Lions, defense still has holes. They either play really well or they get completely gashed. Can they just bottle up the defense? Just make sure that they don't leak too much, because their offense is stacked. They have Goff having a really strong season so far, 4,600 yards, 30 touchdowns, 12 picks. They have Montgomery at running back. They have St. Brown at wide receiver, getting just under 1,600 yards this season. So they can run it. They can throw it. It's just, can their defense keep the game respectable? Looking at the total team stats here, you have the Buccaneers averaging 20.5 points per game. The Lions average 27.1 points per game. So they have a top 10 offense. And on defense, Tampa Bay has a very stout defense. They give up 19.1 points per game. Lions give up 23.2 points per game. Like I was saying, this comes down to how much pressure can the Buccaneers D-line get on Goff, and for the Lions, how much can they keep their defense from getting gashed? Can they control Baker Mayfield? Can they control Evans, Godwin, White? Can they try to keep that game close? I have Detroit getting the win, winning 27-21. Tampa Bay is a great story, but the story ends here this weekend. And the Lions, they finally won a playoff game last weekend, the first time in like 30 years. Props to them, and their story is not over so far this year. Next game, we have the final game of the weekend, 6:30 p.m. on CBS. The 11-6 Kansas City Chiefs, coming off of that frozen game versus Miami where they got the win, versus the 11-6 Buffalo Bills, also coming off of a win this past weekend. This is the AFC Divisional Round playoffs. This game is going to be in New York, and Buffalo is 3-point favorites. This is a rematch, obviously. This was a really good game last year in the playoffs. We have another rematch this year in the playoffs. Two of the best quarterbacks in all of football, Mahomes versus Josh Allen. This is also a rematch from that disaster game, was it 3-4 weeks ago, where the Bills beat the Chiefs, and the Chiefs had the offsides call, and that was a complete disaster the way that I handled that. Made them look really bad, but they can make up for it with a win here and possibly, potentially, cement the road back to the playoffs to try to get a third Super Bowl victory. But the Bills have been in the running for a Super Bowl the whole time they've had Josh Allen. They've just not gotten there. But if they ever make it there, they can finally get a Super Bowl win. This is a really good team, a really talented team. Their biggest issue, they have a top 5 offense, they have a top 5 defense. They're just never on the same page the same week. So whenever the offense plays well, the defense plays like crap. Whenever the defense plays well, Josh Allen has 3-4 turnovers. It's just, can they ever get everything going the same week? If they do, they're one of the deadliest teams because obviously their roster is one of the best stacked rosters top to bottom. Chiefs, they're kind of flip-flop from where they usually are. They have an elite defense this season, but their offense is very, very questionable. A lot of drop passes. Kelsey was dropping the ball this past weekend, but outside of Kelsey and Rice, no one else can catch the ball. So their issue this year has been the offensive side of the ball. Can their offense keep up with the Bills? Can the Chiefs' defense keep the game close enough to where the Chiefs' offense will be able to score enough points to win? But just looking at these rosters, there are a lot of playmakers here. So obviously the Chiefs, they have Mahomes, they have Pacheco, they have Rice, they have Kelsey. But looking at the Buffalo Bills, you have Josh Allen. He has 18 picks. That's pathetic. But he does have 29 touchdowns passing, and he does lead the NFL in total touchdowns. They have Cook at running back. They have Diggs at wide receiver. Total team stats here, Kansas City comes in. They average 21.8 points per game. Buffalo averages 26.5 points per game. And on defense, they both have elite defenses, top 5 defenses. Kansas City averages 17.3 points per game. Buffalo averages 18.3 points per game. Buffalo is finally the favorite here. Can they get over the hump? Can they get past the Chiefs and try to get closer to the Super Bowl? The Chiefs have been the thing holding them back the last few years. I have Buffalo getting the win, 28-20, and covering the spread. Can Kansas City win this game? Definitely. So obviously they usually beat the Bills. It's just they have too many issues on offense, but they are a very experienced team. They know how to win, so they definitely can beat the Bills because the Bills are always capable of beating themselves. Sometimes the defense just doesn't show up. Sometimes Josh Allen just completely loses control. He's throwing picks. He's dropping the ball. He tries to run guys over and fumbles. He gets just out of control. If he can keep the game in front of him, don't turn the ball over. That's the key. Chiefs are going to try to force turnovers. They got a lot of pressure. They're going to hit Josh Allen a lot. They're fine with him running because they're going to hit him every time that he runs, and he doesn't know how to slide. So if the Bills lose, it's because Josh Allen beats the Bills. But if Josh Allen plays the way that he's capable of, he's obviously a top 2 or 3 quarterback, possibly the number 1 quarterback, whenever he plays really good. So I have the Bills getting the win here, finally getting past the Chiefs in the playoffs and moving on to the next round. So that's my breakdown of the NFL Divisional Rounds predictions. Hit that like button and subscribe. If you have any comments, drop them below and I'll make sure to respond.